Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I am your host, Edgar Mills. Thanks for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome to another episode of the Junto Podcast. Thank you all for staying with me. I'm glad you're here. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, today, we're talking about the consumption of entertainment and art and movies, music, fine arts, the whole works, and how that affects us personally on a moral and level and political level and all those things. In these modern times here, folks, social media amplifies everyone's voice, but especially celebrity voices and celebrities' opinions. And hearing these celebrity opinions, is it possible for us to still enjoy one of their movies or their music or their performances, etc., if their personal views clash with ours? You know what I mean? There exists a struggle in most of us, a lot of us, between appreciating these works of art, whatever they are, or entertainment, and then juxtaposing those with our own personal beliefs, the artist's personal flaws, political extremism, or criminal behavior even. And we'll talk about an example of that in a minute. And that's on both ends of the ideological spectrum. It shows up. But how can we guide our own decisions and make ethical choices about what we're consuming when it comes to entertainment? I'm going to make every attempt to be objective and present facts, and then talk a little bit about how the free market kind of affects all this too. But yeah, I'm going to be objective. Now, everything's polarized. We talk about politics a lot on here, and I don't always mean to do that. It just kind of goes that way. But celebrities have a platform, man. They have a humongous platform to speak from. And it's not just about entertainment, right? They talk about all these things. And the tragedy of the modern day is most celebrities are extreme left and political views. And sometimes they alienate half of the fan base. A lot of them do, with their sort of extreme political banter and whatnot. And you hear a lot of people say, hey, just shut up and entertain me, right? Just shut up and play basketball. Just shut up and sing. Entertain me. And I mean, is that 100% right? Maybe, probably not. But so the question is, do you boycott movies from certain producers or actors or things like that? I mean, that's the conflict, right? If you grew up watching, now I'm a big fan of the movies, man. I was so enamored with Hollywood when I was young. I loved movies. I just loved movies. My parents took me to see Jaws at the drive-in theater when it came out. And I was scared shitless of sharks to this day. But it was a great movie, man. It was a great movie. So how do we get around it? Do we get around it? Can we separate the art from the artist, the work that they produce from their own opinions, and still go enjoy a movie without having that thought running in the background? You know what I mean? Again, social media and in the 24/7 news cycle also, it ramps up rhetoric and it increases our own personal scrutiny of people, right? If so-and-so makes the news about making an extreme personal statement, that we carry that with us. And then instead of just our personal consumption of some awesome movie, now we're thinking about the political statements. And it sucks, man. That happens to me a lot, and it sucks. But from a libertarian perspective on that, one, it's an individual choice on whether or not you choose to boycott, some particular star or something. That's personal choice. Don't just jump on board and I'm going to use a little small example of the LGBT community a couple years ago, they got fired up over Chick-fil-A, so they were screaming for everybody to boycott Chick-fil-A. Well, look, can't you just as an individual choose to boycott Chick-fil-A without trying to cancel them or blacklist them or anything like that? So the mob never wants the individuals to make their own choice about things, to make their own ethical compromises or trade-offs or just to choose what a priority, what's important and what isn't. The mob loves to coerce people into what and how to think. That's how activist groups operate. So, but from a libertarian perspective anyway, it's all a very individual choice. So let's keep that in mind, right? These are individual choices. I'm not trying to tell you who to boycott or whatnot. So the question is, and this goes especially for Christians, like at what point do you feel like enjoying this movie or enjoying a certain artist's, whatever music or art or whatever? At what point does that feel like complicity, right? Like that you're supporting and furthering something, a cause that you completely disagree with. So that's the moral aspect of that. But what else, man? The market, right? The free market. You've heard people say you vote with your feet and you vote with your dollars. If you're paying big money to a streaming service that or you think to be, evil, but they got that one show you like, you know what I mean? They got that one show that you can't find anywhere else. That's been the blessing and curse of all these streaming services, man, is that you got to have, if you grew up watching certain shows, and I'll give you for example, I love Have Gun Will Travel. It's an old TV Western from the late 50s into the early 60s. It's only on Pluto. It's only on Pluto. You can't get it anywhere else. But, well, that being said, Pluto's free. But Netflix isn't. Sorry, my dog's back there making noise. Danny. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, the streaming service, they got the one show you like. So do you pay for that? Do you pay monthly to this raging liberal streaming network to watch that one show? Is that one show that important to you? I mean, is any TV really that important to you? I don't think it is that important. Well, let me back that up. Art is important. Entertainment, just in general, is important. Sometimes just for your sanity. Now, just like everything else we talk about, people take things to extremes. And if you're an addictive personality, we talked about this when we were talking about pornography. Addiction. There are people who are addicted to television shows and don't get off the couch. They will sit on the couch and binge watch whatever their shows are. They forge these imaginary relationships with the characters and all this stuff. So, again, I think entertainment is good. I think art is necessary to our world. Yes, even TV, even music, and all that. So, yeah, entertainment's, generally speaking, from my perspective, good. So now back to it. How do we prioritize it? So I'm going to talk about a couple of sort of instances of this and where certain actors or artists, they have whatever political lean they have. They come out kind of extreme on one side or the other, or they had some kind of criminal allegations, which people love to get on their high horse about these criminal allegations. And then some of them may be true, some of them may not. We never really know the truth when it comes to like Hollywood and things like that, and Washington anyway. And we'll see how do we reconcile our core beliefs with still supporting certain actors or actresses. So I'm going to start out with Sean Penn. And I'm going to start with Sean Penn because I grew up watching Sean Penn kind of grow as, well, he's probably maybe 10 years older than me. I think he's a brilliant actor, folks. I think he's a brilliant actor. And he does, he dives into these roles and he's and he's played such a wide range. I wouldn't say he's an underrated because, Hollywood, they pump him up a lot, but I think he's a brilliant actor. If you guys remember Bad Boys, and I'm not talking, folks, not Will Smith and friggin' Martin Lawrence, the Bad Boys from like, I don't know, 1982 or so, or 83 maybe, where they were in like this youth sort of detention jail, prison thing. Man, that was watching that, 10 years old or 11 years old. Man, that was serious business. That was a hard movie, man. And it was good and it was awesome. What's another good one? At Close Range with his brother, Chris Penn, and Christopher Walken. Man, that's some serious business, right? And he was in like Falcon and the Snowman. And then one of my all-time favorites, if you guys ever remember, I want to say it was called Taps. It was a young Sean Penn, young Tom Cruise, young Timothy Hutton. And they were in this military school. And yeah, man, just brilliant performances all the way around. All right. There's the talent right there. There it is. There's the talent. Sean Penn is a hard left-wing activist. So much so that he was literal friends, arguably being used by, but friends with Hugo Chavez, folks, the former Venezuelan dictator, and Raul Castro. He goes down and hobnobs with these communist country leaders who are known to have just the most egregious human rights track records. And even he does get a little bit of beef from the left, but only a little, because these countries that he goes down there and he has these big, these big sort of showcased, staged meetings, with these guys, and they shake hands and they eat and fine food and whatnot. And the LGBT community because those countries are notably anti-LGBT, right? So the left is often contradictory anyway. However, if you go down and just casually enjoy spending time with a ruthless communist dictator, there's some problems there. You're not that smart. You're not as critical as you in your thinking process as you think you are. Now, I'm sure Sean Penn thinks everybody else is just dumb and he's the smartest guy in America. But need I remind you, folks, that communism has killed more people than Nazism ever did, or any other ism. So and I am, by the way, directly and vehemently opposed to communist and socialist ideologies, what does that mean for me to watch a Sean Penn movie? Am I endorsing Sean Penn's ridiculous behavior and points of view there? Well, I don't go to the movies that much anymore, so I don't directly pay that way. And I do have all the streaming services, folks, like all of them. So yeah, I'm paying. I'm supporting that apparatus, that friggin' industry. And if he I'll post up a little clown emoji if he ever says something stupid. So I'm not calling for the world to cancel Sean Penn. And I guess I indirectly support Sean Penn. I have a little turmoil with that, but I think the art stands on its own. So I'm going to continue watching it. All right, let's go to a lesser example. Do you guys remember, Pink, the pop lady Pink, the music, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade a couple years ago? And she came out because she's big and tough. And she says, never fucking listen to my music again if you support that. And what does that mean to her? So on a single issue, she's willing to alienate over half of the American population. And probably, I'm sure she's a worldwide phenomenon, I guess. So, but I'm sure throughout the world, probably half of the population disagrees with abortion and thinks that it's murder. So she's willing, but now, mind you, she already made her money by the time she made this heated statement. So how genuine is it? Well, you got to get along, right? When you're coming up in the business, you got to be cool and keep it down, keep it quiet until you get. So you got to coerce everybody into believing that you're something, and then once you hit it big, then you can come on out and show your true colors. I guess that's the way it is. Now, disclaimer: I've never listened to music from Pink, and never will, regardless of her stance on abortion or any other stance for that matter. Yeah. So what is that? What is that? Right? She cutting off half the population. She vocally, I think she's vocally, everybody in Hollywood and the music industry is vocally against Donald Trump. But now she's like gatekeeping her own audience. Like she's telling you who she's performing for. And it's not everybody. It's only half. Now, clearly from a libertarian perspective, if you're putting music out there and if you like it, you can listen to it. It don't matter what she thinks about it because it's out there in the world. It's out there in the wild. She don't mind taking your money for buying her music, I'm sure. She says so because it's performative. And that's what you call, I think, virtue signaling, which is kind of stupid. Now, let's talk about one. I'm gonna break in here. So next I'm gonna talk about Roman Polanski. But let me break in. Just last night, for the first time ever, me and my wife watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, I happen to be a Quentin Tarantino fan as far as the movies go. I'll go ahead and tell you, I didn't care for the Kill Bill sort of series there. But all the other ones I friggin' love. Reservoir Dogs, yeah, that was in the early 90s or late 80s. Just brilliant. And then, Pulp Fiction, brilliant. I thought Inglourious Basterds was brilliant. I love the revisionist history stuff. I love the way I just like Quentin Tarantino's work. I think it's great. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was about a very famous, well, not the incident specifically, but back when Charlie Manson and the Manson family there, and they murdered Sharon Tate and some others in that house up in the Hollywood Hills. And Roman Polanski was connected to it. Roman Polanski was married to Sharon Tate at the time. But anyway, let's talk about Roman Polanski. So far after that, so I think that incident in that movie took place in maybe 1969, 1970 or something. Years later, because Roman Polanski was a big deal in that time. And if you remember, now I happen to like Roman Polanski's work. My wife wrote the movie Rosemary's Baby. It's one of my wife's favorite movies. That's a proper horror movie. That's a proper scary movie. That's done well and very visually. Yeah, it's good. Who else? Chinatown. Oh man. Yeah, Chinatown. Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway in that. That's some good stuff, man. He's got talent. The guy has talent for making movies. In 1977, he drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl. Now, I blame his parents. Her parents were complicit in that. They should have never, ever. They're just trying to get their daughter famous, and they were willing to sacrifice their daughter for that. She was drugged and raped. He got charged. Yeah, and then he fled. He fled the country, went to France. And I guess, for whatever reason, they couldn't extradite him or whatever. He's still out there right now, celebrated by Hollywood elites. I don't know when the last movie he made is, but he drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl. Yeah. That's some egregious shit right there. And on that, yeah, if Rosemary's Baby's on TV, my wife will watch it. I watched Chinatown many times. I've seen the movie several times, long before I ever really knew about even who directed the movie. You know what I mean? When I was young, and I watched the movie, but where's the line at? I don't know. I think that's it. I think rape of an underage girl is a line, and I don't support Roman Polanski, and I don't purchase his, pay for his films and any of those things. There's my line, right? And yeah, he was charged, but it never went to court, and it was there. But yeah, it was pretty cut and dry based on testimony and those things from other folks. And whatever you want to say about the lifestyle of Hollywood in that time. So whatever the sexual revolution, kind of was waning at that time, but I'm sure in Hollywood, debauchery was at an all-time high. I'm sure, well, in the 70s it definitely was. Everybody remembers Studio 54 in like New York in the 70s. So debauchery was at an all-time high. So yeah, I'm 100% certain that he did what he was accused of doing. 100% certain of it. And I think is Rosemary's Baby still a good movie? It is. Now you can start to get into semantics, right? Well, that movie was made in like 1968 or 67 or 68 before he did what he did. So you can get down to semantics, I guess. But by continuing to support his films, does that shit on the victim? I think it does a little bit. But you could say the same about Sean Penn and communism and all that. So there's so many little avenues that you can go off to either condemn or endorse. There's so many little threads you could pull. Nobody's forced to watch anything. You know what I mean? And if I choose to boycott personally Roman Polanski, then there it is. Am I going to yell and scream at you for watching Roman Polanski films? Nah. I'm going to tell you that he's a rapist and then let you do what you want, but that's it. Because I'm not going to infringe on anybody else's free will, for sure. All right. And on the same note, of Roman Polanski, let's get back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood real quick. Speaking of Tarantino, I didn't think the movie was that great. And maybe because I have an emotional attachment to Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, which the two main characters were kind of loose interpretations of that. But DiCaprio's character, who is, the facsimile of Burt Reynolds, he was an absolute douchebag throughout the entire movie. There was no redeeming qualities for that guy at all. He was vain. He felt sorry for himself. And was Burt Reynolds really like that? I don't know. I don't think Tarantino knows either. But I think that was a poor depiction of what we think Burt Reynolds might have been like. And then the Brad Pitt's character, who was meant to be a Cliff, who was a kind of a facsimile of Hal Needham, was he a shitbag? I don't know. His character was cool as hell. To me, he was the main character. I know DiCaprio was de facto main character, but I think Brad Pitt was the main character in that movie. Yeah. He was personable. He was cool. He was laid back. He was not pretentious. You know what I mean? I don't like Tarantino's depiction of people that I consider, I don't know, screen heroes. And Hal Needham, not because he was a screen hero, but because he was a Hollywood stuntman. And I was very enamored with Hollywood stuntmen. I got a cousin, Derek, who when I was very young, he did a little stint as a stuntman. And man, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And Hal Needham was, if you watch Have Gun Will Travel, you can see him in an early episode. Well, throughout the whole run of that, he was a stuntman and a character in a lot of those episodes. Anyway, I'm dragging on. And then one more, much as I like the Hal Needham depiction there. And then a depiction of Bruce Lee, man. They had him painted up like a arrogant douchebag. Was he? I don't know, but he was also a childhood hero. And maybe that's my fault for having heroes as a child, right? I shouldn't have put somebody up on a pedestal knowing that they're human and flawed. Is that right? No, man, I was a kid. I was a kid in the 70s. Bruce Lee was absolute money. Yeah, Bruce Lee was absolute money. And I watched Green Hornet, by the way. All right. Yeah. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Not that awesome. I mean, was the filmmaking okay? Yeah, sure. And even though, Tarantino's known for the gratuitous violence, but I thought at the end when the hippies tried to break in and kill everybody, and then they got, the violence. I think it was purposely overdone. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think it was as good as some other movies, but that was also a little revisionist history, right? The reality is the Manson family hippies went to Sharon Tate's house instead of, you know, Cliff and Rick Dalton's house there. So, and then the reality is they did the murders and went to jail. And by the way, Sharon Tate was in fact pregnant when she was murdered, which makes it all the more egregious. But anyway, Charles Manson, you know, everybody knows Charles Manson. All right, now moving on. Sorry about that. I just watched that movie last night. I had to talk about it. What about, I'm sure everyone knows and has an image and a vision of Woody Allen. Oh, he's so brilliant, Woody Allen. Oh, he's a brilliant New Yorker. Oh, he's always so nervous. Woody Allen has some pretty good films. I watched Vicky Cristina Barcelona on one of my deployments. That was like one of the, you know, they got ripped DVDs over there, like pirated DVDs, and that was one of them that I had. So I watched it. I thought it was a good movie, man. I like, you know, Scarlett Johansson, and I thought Javier Bardem it was good. It was a good movie. You know, adults having their little dalliances and then having deep angst about it and all that stuff. Not only was Woody Allen accused, now he got over on this, and I think it's because he probably has a lot of power in Hollywood and New York, but he was accused of sexually abusing his adopted daughter, Dylan, when she was 7 years old. Yeah. Now, here's the weirdness. Mia Farrow was in Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski, and then married Woody Allen. Now, I'm sure at some point Woody Allen and Roman Polanski knew each other and probably hung out, and God knows what kind of debauchery those two were up to. But yeah, he was accused of sexually abusing a 7-year-old adopted daughter. All right, well, that's bad enough, right? So then he and Mia Farrow also adopt a young Chinese girl named Sun Yi. And then upon their divorce, he marries his adopted daughter, Sun Yi. I got to imagine, am I being judgmental? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I am. I can only imagine that Woody Allen was doing horrible things with Sun Yi long before she was of age. And then to marry your adopted daughter, never mind what your intentions truly are. And yeah, you shouldn't do anything just to make sure everybody else is okay with it. But the optics on that, and I hate to say the optics because that's whatever. But that looks nefarious just on the surface. There is no way he wasn't doing inappropriate things with that girl. And it was inappropriate to marry her too, but not illegal. And generally speaking, but he was a man in a position of power that had significant sway over this young adopted Chinese girl. I think it's egregious. I think it's horrible. I think he's a criminal. I do not like Woody Allen. And I've seen Woody Allen films. Yeah, everybody carries on about Annie Hall. Annie Hall, and, you know, Manhattan, you know, movies like that. One I watched when I was a kid because it was funny and it was on like cable. Everything you always want to know about sex, but we're afraid to ask. Yeah, man, like, and you can see the inclinations of some people in their work, right? Like, for instance, Quentin Tarantino. I think it's just widely and broadly understood Quentin Tarantino has a foot fetish. It's in every movie. You can't escape it. There's always very artistic depictions and very, you know, detailed depictions of women's bare feet. And I don't hate on it for that. That ain't illegal. It might be a little weird, but I think you can also see some inclinations from Woody. Yeah. Yeah, I don't care for Woody Allen. And if you want to think critically, right, like he was never actually arrested for that, either one of those things, and never charged. So you can say, okay, well, it was never substantiated, so he's good. He was just a victim of false allegations. if you call yourself a critical thinker, you can go that. But if you call yourself a critical thinker, you can go another level deeper and understand that his level of influence and sway probably had something to do with that lack of charge, right? So you can go off hearsay, or you can go off, well, hey, the evidence says he was, whatever. Everybody has their own belief in their heart of hearts about things. Yeah, Woody Allen. All right, here we go. And now we're kind of going to go on the other end of the spectrum a little bit. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter books and all that, the fame, right? Just, they were, over the course of about 10 years, the epic that Harry Potter was everywhere. It was Harry Potter, and it was a series, so it just goes on, like Lord of the Rings. It's never ending. But yeah, Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, and she had some other stuff under her pseudonym even. So very successful. J.K. Rowling was very successful, or is, but she violated liberal dogma because she's critical of the transgender movement, the transgender activists who are pushing and pushing and pushing, because she thinks it's important. Biological sex is important, and that it's a critical point to women's rights. Yeah, women's rights. So she's been called a transphobe, and she stands on it, and she owns it. And I don't think she even gets that, bent out of shape about it. She just says what she says, and that's it. You can take it or leave it. So yeah, the left has been very critical of her, and there was a backlash, and she got criticism from actors who benefited from her talent. Young Emma Watson and Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah. Hey, thanks for the great success and catapulting me into superstardom, but you're a transphobe, and I disagree, and I think you should be boycotted or whatever. So if you enjoy Harry Potter books, do you conflate that with transphobia? Do you think, oh my God, I mean, the same way, right? We talked about Sean Penn and communism. Is that running in the background? Now, I got to imagine the lefties love boycotting, and they love the mob mentality, and they love cancel culture. Now, I feel like probably libertarians at least are a little more rational about these kinds of things, to whether or not, yes, if you do believe that, if you think she's just a vile person, and you can choose not to read her books. But also, do these people, these artists, are they, well, look, sexual harassment and sexual abuse is not free speech. But these others, right, who just, Sean Penn, for instance, and J.K., are they entitled to their free speech? The catchphrase these days is, you can have freedom of speech, but not freedom of consequences. That's a big catchphrase going around these days. Yeah. But are they entitled to this same free speech? Or what? Can we separate her fantasy books and her fantasy world from her personal opinions without calling for some kind of collective censorship? Yeah, I don't know. Think about that. And then we have one of my favorites, folks, Dave Chappelle. Yeah, man. Dave Chappelle's been controversial in his jokes. Now, look, man, I follow some comedians. Everybody loves comedy. I love comedy. Well, at what point does comedy go too far? Who knows? It's even in bad taste. I was a fan of Andrew Dice Clay, big style, and he was tasteless. That was part of what made it funny. It was how tasteless it was. But yeah, you make some transgender jokes. And boom. The activists are up in arms. But he came out in support of J.K. Rowling, actually, on this transgender stuff, and said that gender is a fact. And I do believe that, folks. I know transgender people, and I don't hate on them at all. I just think there's a lot of nuance in there. There's a lot of psychological stuff going on and emotional stuff going on. But he said he was on Team Turf. A guy on another podcast that I listen to sometimes, he mentioned the term turf, TERF, and I didn't know what it was. I had to text him and go, "Hey, bro, what is this? Break this down for me. Explain this to me." Turf, because Dave Chappelle said he's on Team Turf. I don't know what the hell that is. I'm going to tell you what I think I remember it to be. I think it is trans exclusionary radical feminism. I think that's what it is. And so I think they attribute that to people like J.K. Rowling, people who are very vocal in women's rights and feminism, who are opposed to men being named Women of the Year on Glamour magazine, because that's just detracting from women. And so these turf women, and I guess men too, oppose the transgendered men dressing up as women and superseding and overshadowing the rights and the domain of women. Yeah. So that's a bridge too far for me. That's two very super specialized activist groups that I can't go down that far. I just can't do it. Can't do it. So look, Dave Chappelle, he's funny and he rips on everyone. And it's funny, man. It's funny. He rips on disabled people. Is that funny? Yeah, it's funny, man. If you don't have a sense of humor about some of these, comedy is the final frontier for free speech, folks. If you start canceling comics for saying controversial stuff, we're lost, man. We're lost. People tried to get Dave canceled from Netflix. And guess what Netflix did? They made that financial decision. They didn't get rid of Dave. Because Dave makes them money. And they're in business to be in business. Netflix is liberal. They put a lot of liberal garbage on their platform. But they don't want to lose that Dave Chappelle money. So they're making a priority choice too, aren't they? Yeah. And who else, man? Speaking of that. All right, let me go back. Okay, and then we got there's some other examples. Okay, I'm going to skip those. I don't want to. And speaking of, so I wouldn't say Dave's a conservative at all, but let's look at the conservative side of that. Speaking of entertainment, right? Sports is just entertainment. There's a handful of football. Tim Tebow now people say, well, he wasn't as good a football player as people said. But the NCAA, you remember they put the black paint under the eyes, but then people start putting Bible verses in them? And NCAA banned that for putting scripture underneath their eyes. There's dudes out there doing these crazy dances and these bizarre, rituals in the end zone. But you can't have John 3:16 under your eye. Yeah, Tim Tebow. He was kind of perceived it was controversial, but was it? He's just a Christian. He's just an outspoken Christian. That's it. And he's gone on to do great things in the nonprofit world, helping people, around the world based on his Christian values. What about Chris Pratt? Now, granted, Chris Pratt's one of the biggest stars in America today, but he still gets constant criticism. Because he's a Christian, he's a conservative. And one of the most outspoken, I keep going back to the LGBT community, trans community, that they're the most outspoken. They're the smallest percentage-wise of American population, but the loudest. And that's a badge of honor for them, I guess, but, trying to get people canceled, man. Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, yes, I'm a Marvel fan. I grew up reading Marvel comics and all the movies. At some point, they kind of just became whatever they became, But yeah, he gets constant constant grief from the liberals. James Woods is another. James Woods was in some good movies. He's a good actor. He was in some great movies in the 80s, but he's an outspoken conservative. He can't get work. Can't get work in Hollywood because he's a conservative. But one of my other favorites is Dennis Miller. Now, speaking of comics, he started out as a comic. Dennis Miller is a pretty brilliant guy, and he's noted for his very obscure references that you have to be an educated person to even remotely understand. But yes, after, probably in the 2000s, he started getting more and more conservative. He's done work with, like Bill O'Reilly, who was back on Fox News days, and he had a podcast for a while. He might still, and all that. He started out, Saturday Night Live as the news desk, the Weekend Update. And his opening song was, Lunatic, the Pink Floyd. The lunatic was in my brain. It was good. And he's got the big signature thing. Yeah, man. Dennis Miller. You don't see him much. Now, he's probably just loving life, He's probably just out there staying low and loving life. Probably lives in, Santa Monica or somewhere. Kevin Sorbo. He's an outspoken conservative Christian. You see him on these, if you guys remember, he was Hercules back on that, USA, I think, in the 90s, that Xena, Warrior Princess, and Hercules. And he's in a few things here. He's been in some Christian produced films, but you don't see that guy doing work in Hollywood, mainstream work. All right. So anyway, that's enough example, guy. We can sit here and do this all day. The hyper-partisan politics is pervasive in the entertainment industry, especially in California, especially in Hollywood, but all over. Entertainers in general. You grow up, all right, here's what I imagine. All right, this is here's what I imagine. You come up, you want to be an entertainer, right? At a young age, you realize, I want to be an actor, or I want to be a musician, or I want to be. So you spend the early, 10, 15 years of your early life struggling. And you're appreciating, oh man, well, at least I got some SNAP, or at least I got some EBT, and you're eating ramen and you're living on people's couches. And any subsidies you can get from the government is welcomed because you're barely alive. Well, you're barely living physically, right? You're out there trying to make it big. So, and you see government largesse as correct, and it's kindness. The government should take care of me so that I can pursue my dreams. So, and now this is my thoughts. And then let's say you're one out of 1,000 that hits it big, and you start getting regular work. Yeah. And you start getting regular work, and you're out there, and you got a little bit part in this and a bit part in that. And you're getting a little more recognizable, and maybe you've done a couple of, you had 3 lines in a movie, but they were delivered with all the gusto, right? All the emotion and somebody noticed it, and they're like, man, this guy's got potential. This gal's got potential. The next thing you know, you're in a couple things. You got you're in a miniseries as a supporting role. Yeah. And now your bank account's starting to build up. And you're feeling a little more comfortable. You don't really need, the government's no longer a thing, right? I don't need the government anymore. I'm making a pretty good living. I got a sweet ride. I got a sweet apartment. And then you get a movie, and you're the main character, and it was a success, and you made a few million off it. Well, a few million for a regular human that's life right there. I'm good to go for the rest of my life. But you're living in Hollywood now, right? You've been living on couches and going from homie to homie, maybe even sometimes in the back of your van. But now you got a couple million, and now you got a movie under your belt, a big movie. People loved it. And there's already people hitting you up for another one. Oh, we got a mini series lined up, and you're the main character. Now you're millions into it. Now you're worth, a couple $100 million, and you're walking around Hollywood like you're a native, right? You hate the tourists. You came from, I don't know, Alabama or Missouri or somewhere, but now you're walking around Hollywood because you've made it, and now you're a native, right? You look down on all the people coming in from the Midwest and the South and wherever, and you're starting to be a part of the Hollywood. You're a staple in Hollywood society. And now it's the unfortunates. You look at them, you see them on the streets when you drive by in your very big Mercedes. You see them on the streets. Hollywood's full of them. Los Angeles is full of them. There's homeless everywhere. It's an epidemic. And you see them and you think, oh, how unfortunate. Somebody should do something about that. So you go on and then you're sitting in a junket, or you're on a little interview with someone, and you're like, yeah, Donald Trump is such a piece of shit. He really should do something about this. Gavin Newsom tries so hard, but he just can't get any support from Donald Trump. And so we have these poor, unfortunate, the illegals. They need citizenship so that they can succeed. And we got the homeless. Why don't Donald Trump do something about it? Oh, no, I got to run. I got a lunch date on my yacht. We're talking about a new movie. Yep, I'm pitching a new movie to Chris Nolan. We're gonna sit on the yacht and have some lunch. Yep. Hyperpartisan politics, and then these artists, they lose touch. Never mind the conspiracies, Never mind the conspiracies. They lose touch. They're out there pushing these hyperpartisan talking points, and they're just enjoying the luxury and the excess of being a Hollywood actor. Yeah. But then you're getting more and more, you're Mark Ruffalo. You're out there talking about how horrible everything is. I don't know. I would like to see Mark Ruffalo's tax returns or his charitable donations or his physical volunteering. I'd like to see it. I mean, maybe he does, I can't say that he doesn't because I don't know. But I got to imagine any Hollywood star, most of them, if they're going to do a thing like that, it's going to be publicized. I got to imagine that. So they're using their platform now from their position of luxury to push the division between regular Americans and all of those elite who know better. Yeah. And it just furthers the social divides, folks. And then everything they say, at some point, when you're on the other end of that, everything they say looks like now they're just reading from a propaganda script. Yeah. They might be genuine, but everything they say now, it looks like they're reading from a script because largely they use the same script. They use the same talking points, largely. They all do movies together, you know what I mean? They all do the same movies. And they all sleep with the same people. Yeah, they all sleep around in the same beds. They all go to the same parties. And they no longer have the capacity to objectively look at the world, America, let alone third world countries and whatnot. So it's on us if we're going to follow these people. How far are we going to follow them? How far are we going to follow them? Do I have to like Sean Penn as a person to like his movies? Can I enjoy his movies and then critique him? And if Sean Penn called me today, could I sit and have a conversation with him about how wrong I think he is about most things? And then turn around and tell him how awesome I think he was in Bad Boys. Or even, hey, there's a movie Ben Stiller did, I don't know, a decade ago maybe, called Walter Mitty, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is based on an old Danny Kaye film, by the way. But I thought Sean Penn's character in that movie was odd. That's the guy I want to be. I want to be some world traveling recluse photographer, getting that one shot of the Himalayan snow leopard, taking a picture and then not even not even developing the film, just letting it be. His character was awesome, man. It was a good character. I liked it. I like when I look at him do that. I like that character, and I want to like Sean Penn. And then I hear Sean Penn saying some bizarre communist garbage, and then I come back to reality. So, how far do we want to follow them, folks? Do we have to follow their political? Like, if you're enamored with Mark Ruffalo, and he starts spouting off nonsense, do you too start spouting off the nonsense? Is that how much you like him so much that you're like, oh man, he can't be wrong? Yeah, I don't know about that. So when it comes to us making our minds up on these people and how we consume our entertainment, well, we got one, and this is all from an individual perspective. You as an individual, right? One, assess, especially with like the dudes accused of criminal rape, among other things, or O.J. Simpson murdering his wife. They're still O.J. fans, folks. I grew up watching O.J. play football. Yeah, I was an O.J. fan. And then what happened? He murdered his wife. I'm no longer an O.J. fan. So you got to assess the severity of whatever you're looking at there. And does it warrant your little individual boycott? Is it a political thing and you can just like, okay, well, he's stupid and you can overlook it and carry on? Or if it's Roman Polanski raping a girl and you're like, no, I can't be okay with that guy. So you got to look at that severity. And then you got to weigh benefits, right? Does the art have value, for one? Is it good? Is it quality? Is it something that enriches your life in a sort of maybe emotional or, way? Or is it just mindless, whatever nonsense? So does the quality of the art have a stake in that? Does that weigh in? Maybe. I think so. There's 8 million, B movies out there that nobody can tell you a single name of a single person in the movie. There's 8 million musicians out there that nobody knows who they are. They just didn't hit. They didn't have an impact. Yeah. And then how's the market go? Some people, the market, right? The free market. Are we supporting these people with our dollars? Or and does supporting streaming platforms support these people? I don't know. Now look, I'm a libertarian. I believe in property rights. I believe in all these things. But every movie I watched when I was in Iraq was a pirated DVD. That's just the way it was. Yeah, every one. Because you could go get a DVD for like a buck, or and that wasn't going to Sean Penn. That buck didn't go to Sean Penn. But yeah, you need to respect property rights and like copyright and stuff. Like now, I granted these people work hard, and they should receive the benefits of their labor. I don't think it's easy being an actor by any stretch. I kind of do, but also I think there's just memorizing all these lines and all these things and emoting, like being able to relay emotion. Yeah, I don't think it's easy. I know being a musician isn't easy. I know being an artist isn't easy. So they deserve the money they get as far as the work goes. So there's that. There's the free market sort of thing. You can either just completely not consume entertainment or figure out who deserves your money, I guess. And then, of course, just like my last episode, we have to avoid hypocrisy when we're making these decisions. Apply the standards consistently across the board. So if I can give Sean Penn a break because he's such a brilliant actor, who else? Can I give, well, I'm drawing a blank right now. Can I give Christopher Walken a break? Now, I've never heard Christopher Walken make a political statement in my life. And I've been watching movies with that dude since way back, since daggum The Deer Hunter. You know what I mean? Dogs of War. Yeah, I don't know what his political stance is. I got to imagine it's liberal. I think he was born and raised in New York City. So I got to imagine. But it doesn't run in the back. There's not a background app running with me criticizing Christopher Walken as I'm watching him deliver the the watch speech and Pulp Fiction. No, man, I'm just watching him deliver some brilliant dialogue and thinking, God, this is awesome. Yeah. So do I hold all these actors and musicians to the same standard? I don't know. I guess it goes back to the severity of what they're doing and whether their art has like deeper value. But at any rate, no one else should dictate your consumption of entertainment, movies, music, or otherwise. So as the First Amendment states, we have a freedom of association and we can consume what we want to consume. We have a freedom of expression, and so does everyone else, even actors. But again, like I said, the catchphrase earlier, you can freely express, you have a freedom of speech, but you don't have a freedom of consequences. And there are some bizarre groups out there that'll boycott you and try to out you and try to dox you and all that stuff. So I don't think that's necessarily free market either. That's coercion. I say let the free markets do what they do, right? They can reward or punish the value of some art without any government or intervention or mob mentality or cancel culture. That's what I think. It's hard to say we need to keep politics out of entertainment because there are Christian production companies making the sound of freedom. There's a Christian conservative company that makes another one. That makes, and I remember it being one was about a cop. I want to say it was in Albany, Georgia. I think Kirk Cameron was involved with that. So there's that out there. So do we keep politics out of it? Well, the art, we know a lot, there's a lot of politics in the art. Art probably partially came to exist out of critique of politics. So you don't necessarily need to keep, excuse me. Sorry. You don't necessarily need to keep politics out of the art. But again, we're talking about separating the art from the artist. Do something that's brilliant and artistically striking and poignant. But then when you're doing your interviews, man, don't shit on half the population. Maybe we could do it that way. In a free society, folks, separating the art from the artist is an individual choice and it's individual liberty. I always encourage you to stay away from the collective, stay away from the mob mentality and the cancel culture and all that stuff. Just do some thoughtful analysis because there is a lot of cultural, richness in the movies and in music. Where would we be without movies and music and art? But you can consume that stuff and enjoy it for what it is without compromising your own principles. You can. So go out and consume some art, even if it's visual art, even fine art, oil paintings and sculptures. Because hardly ever do we hear about those artists' political opinions. Well, one, they're not as famous as athletes and actors and whatnot, but yeah, consume the art, folks. Take it in. Analyze it for what it is. Don't read into it. And enjoy it for what it is and don't read into it. And if the guy on the screen is a douchebag in person, yeah, I don't know. Don't call him up. Don't send him a Christmas card. You know what I mean? Enjoy art. Enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy it at face value. Yeah, that's what I got, folks. That's where I'm at. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm happy to hear your feedback on it. For sure, I'm happy to hear your feedback on it. And please do send it. And reach out to me and tell me do you have that in your life? Do you have an artist, an actor, a musician that you like, but you totally disagree with them politically? Yeah. I don't know. Tell me your story. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Next weekend, we got the Follow the Wall match, 2-gun match coming up. That's 9 November. Going to be from 10 until complete. And that's 2-gun, and it's going to be good. In November, again, later in November, I want to say 17 or 18 and 19, possibly, we have the 2-day land nav course. Find that on twoteamguys.com. And then we have the 3-day land nav course, 5, 6, and 7 December. And that's a beast, and it's awesome. So Find that also on twoteamguys.com. If you have the means, please give to Help a Homie Fund. That is givesendgo.com/Help a Homie Fund. And if you can't give, please share it and send it to all your friends and whatnot. And other than that, folks, be good to each other. Have good manners when you're out in the wild. And take care.